Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Chanukah, and today we're actually going to complete Hilchos Chanukah, and we're going to segue into Hilchos, we're going to continue on into Hilchos Megillah, beginning with the halacha of the Dalit Parshiyos. So we have a lot to do. I'm going to actually try to cover Daf Kuf Mem Tes Amud Beis and Kuf Nun Amud Aleph, which would put us back onto the Dirsha schedule. No promises, we shall try. We pick up today, however, on the bottom of Kuf Mem Tes Amud Aleph. We have a tiny bit of unfinished business here in Siman Taf Reish Pei Daled. So here in Siman Taf Reish Pei Daled in Sif Gimel, we had been discussing various cases of what could happen when Rosh Chodesh Teves, in the middle of Chanukah, is on Shabbos, different scenarios of the Kriyas HaTorah. What we had left off with was, I'll read for continuity's sake, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch, right by the Ois Katan Yud Beis for the Mishnah Berurah. I'm not going to go through the Mishnah Berurahs again, but just for the case. So the Mechaber said over here, Im Chal Rosh Chodesh B'Chol, if Rosh Chodesh Teves falls out during the week, on a weekday of Chanukah, Moitziin Shnei Sfarim, we take out 2 Sifrei Torah. The Kairin Be'echad Shloisha B'Shal Rosh Chodesh, with the first Sefer Torah we lay 3 aliyahs on Rosh Chodesh. So we take the regular Rosh Chodesh Kriyas HaTorah for during the week, and we divide it into 3 aliyahs, which is much easier than what we normally have to do. We normally have to divide it into 4 aliyahs. We have to repeat a pasuk. Now we get to do it in 3 aliyahs. Ubasheni, and in the second Sefer Torah, Kari Echad B'Shal Chanukah, we lay 1 aliyah with 1 nasi for that day of Chanukah. V'im ta hachazan, if the chazan makes a mistake, v'kara revi b'shal Rosh Chodesh, if the Gabbai and the Balkara and the people are half asleep, and the Balkara goes ahead and divides the Rosh Chodesh laning up into 4 aliyahs, so then the Mechaber said it depends. Im lo yotziu Sefer Sheni, if they really klutzed up and they didn't take out 2 Sifrei Torah, they treated the day like a regular weekday of Rosh Chodesh. They took out 1 Sefer Torah and they divided up the Rosh Chodesh weekday Kriya into 4 aliyahs, and then they realized, we goofed. So Im lo yotziu Sefer Sheni, Ein tzarich likros yoser, you don't have to lay anything additional. And the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Yud Daled told us Ein mashgichen b'Chanukah, which is fascinating because that happens to be, I think it's yesterday's daf, was Ein mashgichen b'Chanukah. The Kriya of Chanukah is not really an Iker. That's what Rashi says, Ein mashgichen b'Chanukah la asoisoi Iker. The laning, the Chanukah laning is not such an Iker. We lane on Chanukah, but what we lane on Chanukah is not really so critical. After all, let's remember, why do we lane the Nesiim on Chanukah? Not because the Nesiim are about Chanukah. Chanukah is a D'Rabbanan. It happened thousands of years later. So there's nothing in the Torah HaKadosha, in Torah Shebiksav, certainly in Chamisha Chumshei Torah, directly about Chanukah. So why do we lane the Nesiim? Because Chanukah begins on Chafei Kislev, and the Meleches HaMishkan was Nigmar. The work of the Mishkan was completed on Chafei Kislev, so we lane from the Nesiim. But what we lane on Chanukah is really not so critical. So you laned Rosh Chodesh, because it is Rosh Chodesh. You had Kriyas HaTorah, you're okay. So if you didn't take out a second Sefer Torah for the Chanukah Kriya, that's it, you're done. Aval, however, Im Haitziu Sefer Sheni, if they did take out 2 Sifrei Torah, and they used the first Sefer Torah, and they went ahead and they did 4 aliyahs in Rosh Chodesh, now, Mishum Pegamai, now because of the risk of an insult to the second Sefer Torah, you took out a Sefer Torah, then you never used it. It's going to look like Chas v'Chalila, it's a puzzle of Sefer Torah. Tzarech likros chamishi b'shal Chanukah, you're actually going to have a 5th aliyah to lay in Chanukah. That's what the Mechaber said. Now comes the Ramah. The Ramah gives another scenario. V'im ta, let's say they made a different mistake. V'hischel likros b'shal Chanukah. Okay, they came up to the laning. It's a Tuesday, let's say, and it's Rosh Chodesh. It's the 6th day of Chanukah. It's Rosh Chodesh and it's Chanukah, and they came to lane, but they klutzed. They made a mistake. Instead of starting with Rosh Chodesh, they're supposed to lane 3 aliyahs of Rosh Chodesh and then 1 aliyah of Chanukah. V'im ta, if that's not what they did, and instead v'hischel likros b'shal Chanukah, They started right away with Chanukah. They called up a kohen and they laned Chanukah. Tzarech, the Ramah says, tzarech lahafsik. They have to interrupt the Kriya, likreis b'shal Rosh Chodesh, and they have to go lane the Rosh Chodesh laning. That's what the Ramah brings down from the what's colloquially known as the Abu Draham. I believe the proper pronunciation is actually Abu Darham. But whatever it is, you have to, the Ramah rules that you have to interrupt the laning and go to lane Chanukah. We'll see the Mishnah Berurah will discuss this. And then says the Ramah, now that you have this strange scenario, you called up the kohen made a bracha on the beginning of his aliyah, the Balkaris started to lane Rosh Chodesh, they realized that they made started to lane Chanukah, they realized that they made a mistake and really they're supposed to be laning Rosh Chodesh. The Ramah says you need to interrupt the aliyah and you need to go lane Chanukah. Well, what happens to the bracha? Turns out that the kohen made the bracha on the wrong place in the Sefer Torah. So do you have to make it? Does the kohen have to make a new bracha? Says the Ramavim. Tzarech levarach hakriyas Rosh Chodesh ayin le'el siman kuf mem siv gimel with his machlokes. If you call up the oila and the oila makes a bracha on the wrong place in the Sefer Torah, do you make another bracha or not? There's a machlokes. It depends on the exact scenario, but I believe we paskin over there that you do make a new bracha. But in any case, that's the psak of the Ramah. Now let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Yud Zayin. Tzarech lahafsik, the Ramah ruled that you have to interrupt the Kriya. Says the Mishnah Berurah, not so fast, calm down. Ayin b'Taz, take a look at the Taz, Shekasav, who writes, Tahai psak alav desamchahu, that this psak of the Ramah is not an authoritative psak. I didn't look up the Taz itself to see what the Taz says inside. I'm not sure what it means that it's not an authoritative psak. If it's a toyus or what, it's not a real Ramah. I'm not sure. I'll be very honest. I didn't have a chance to look up the Taz. Maybe I'll try to look into it. But in any case, the Taz disagrees with this psak. And he says, Ve'ein tzarech lahafsik. Calm down. You don't have to interrupt the Kriyas HaTorah. After all, it is Chanukah and it is Rosh Chodesh. So all right, they lamed Chanukah first. Or rather, what you should do is, Karei kohen b'shal Chanukah. Let the kohen finish this aliyah and do the laning of Chanukah. And then you'll do Rosh Chodesh afterwards. It says, take a look at the Biur Halacha, where I go through some of the details, and we're going to read part of this Biur Halacha inside. But first, let's see Mishnah Berurah's Katan Yud Ches, Tzarech levarich, ayin b'Biur Halacha. And again, that's a discussion of whether or not, if the oila was given the wrong place and made the bracha in the wrong place, does he make another bracha or not? Now, if you go to the Biur Halacha, Dibra Amaschil v'imta v'hischil tzarech lahafsik. I'm not going to read the entire Biur Halacha here, but if we go down several lines, we come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. By me, it's 6 lines down in the Biur Halacha. Mikam Makim, Harbe Achroinim, many Achroinim, and he gives a list of Achroinim over here. Skip a couple of lines. Umiklalam Gama Magen Avram B'Simin Kuf Mem B'Seifai. These Achrayim include the Magen Avram. Hayru LaHalacha K'Divrei HaTaz. They paskin like the psak of the Taz, that if the kohen was called up and they started to lane Chanukah before Rosh Chodesh, that you continue and you lane Chanukah and then you lane Rosh Chodesh. Since the kohen started off his aliyah already, and they started laning Chanukah, tzarech ligmar kohen b'shal Chanukah. Let him finish his aliyah with the Chanukah Kriya b'Sefer Torah Zu in this Sefer Torah. Then use the second Sefer Torah for the Kriyas HaTorah of Rosh Chodesh. You'll call up 3 aliyahs for Rosh Chodesh. Skip the parentheses. V'haschala, what does it mean that you started the Kriya with Chanukah? V'haschala nikra mishehischel avarach habracha. If the oila already said Baruch Atah Hashem, Dainu Shama Baruch Atah Hashem, if you called up the oila and the oila already said the shame of the first bracha, and the Sefer Torah is open to the Chanukah Kriya, now you already laid the Chanukah Kriya for the kohen. Avalam lo hischel avarich. But if the kohen has not yet started his aliyah. Now, this scenario we could see very simple. What happens if they took out 2 Sifrei Torah, which is what they're supposed to do? One Sefer Torah is rolled to Parshas Nasai for Chanukah. The other Sefer Torah is rolled to Pinchas for Rosh Chodesh. Nosai Pinchas, not so far from each other. They put the wrong Sefer Torah on the bima first. They opened up the Sefer Torah, and maybe the Baal Korah actually looked in the Sefer Torah and he saw the Chanukah laning, and he knows it's Chanukah, so he pointed to the Kohen. The Kohen goes, Baruch Atah Hashem, and then the Baal Korah goes, Oive, what am I doing? They put the wrong Sefer Torah on the bima. I'm not supposed to be laying Chanukah, I'm supposed to be laying Rosh Chodesh. So we could see this scenario happening. So, Avalim lo yizchil levarich. So if he said Baruch Atah Hashem, too late. Lane the Chanukah laning, lane one nasi, and then you'll put away this Sefer Torah, you'll take out the next Sefer Torah, and you'll do Rosh Chodesh. Avalim lo yizchil levarich. But let's say the Baal Korah opens the Sefer Torah and catches the mistake before the Kohen begins the Aliyah. Then, Avshen is damin biyadam oiseshu mesukat lachanukah. Even though they got the wrong Sefer Torah on the bima and it's open to Chanukah, ein loy lachish lo zelu kol yama. We don't have to worry. V'yigalalu, close it up. V'yikru b'Sefer Torah acheres, take back the other Sefer shoytziu l'shem Rosh Chodesh, and lane 3 aliyahs for Rosh Chodesh, and then take the Chanukah Sefer back and lane Chanukah. I pagam to the Sefer Torah, says the Biur Halacha, no. Vein kan pagam the Sefer Torah zu. Over here there is no pagam. Kevan sheyikru ba'achakach. What kind of pagam to the Sefer Torah? Everybody's going to see that you're going to use that Sefer Torah. You're putting it away temporarily, but soon you're going to take it back out and you're actually going to use it. Uber Rosh Chodesh Tevis shechal b'Shabbos. If Rosh Chodesh Tevis fell out on Chanukah, shetzarch lahitzi shloisha svarim, where you're taking out 3 Sifrei Torah, and the first Sefer Torah is for the Parsha Shavua, the second one is supposed to be for Rosh Chodesh, and the third one is supposed to be for Chanukah. V'inyani Chanukah karim b'shlishas kanal, you're supposed to use the third Sifrei Torah for Chanukah. What happens im ta'u, if they made a mistake, v'karu b'sheni b'shal Chanukah, if you used the second Sefer Torah for Chanukah, u'b'shlishas b'shal Rosh Chodesh, that's fine. You still got Rosh Chodesh and you got Chanukah. Mikamakim karin ha'haftarah b'shal Chanukah. So now, what happened was, normally, you do Rosh Chodesh, then Chanukah, then the Haftarah of Chanukah. And we said there are 2 reasons you do the Haftarah of Chanukah. One is, even though Tadr v'she'enoi Tadr Kaidim, which would be an argument to do the Haftarah for Rosh Chodesh, but since Chanukah is Parsumei Nisa is Adif. That was one reason. A second reason was, since you just did the Maftir of Chanukah, it makes sense to do the Haftarah of Chanukah. But over here, you switched the Maftirim. Over here, you did Chanukah first and then Rosh Chodesh. So maybe now you should do the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no, you'd still do the Haftarah of Chanukah, Mishum Parsumei Nisa. Okay, fine. Now, that concludes Siman Tov Reish Pei Dalet, and that concludes the halachas of Chanukah. Now we move on to Hilchas Megillah. Siman Tov Reish Pei Hey, Hilchas Megillah, and Hilchas Megillah is going to take us through the conclusion of Chelik Vav and the Siyum on Gans Mishnah Berurah. Okay, so now we go to Siman Tov Reish Pei Hey, Seder Arba Parshiyos, the proper order of the Dalet Parshiyos, Ubay Zayin Seifim, and here we have 7 Seifim. Now, for those of you that are learning Daf Yomi, this is incredibly fascinating. You can't make this up. The Dirshu and the Daf Yomi are perfectly aligned. Daf Chav Tes in Megillah, Daf Lamed in Megillah is the whole subject of the Dalet Parshiyos and what the Seder of them is, which Shabbos in Adar you learn what happens if Purim falls out on Erev Shabbos, what happens if Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Erev Shabbos. Guess what? That's Kuf Mem Tes Amid Beis and Kuf Nun Amid Aleph in Chelik Vav, which is exactly what Dirshu is holding. So Dirshu, Daf Yomi, Bahalacha, and Daf Yomi are exactly perfectly aligned. What a siyata d'shmaya. Seder Arba Parshiyos Ubay Zayin Seifim. Before we dive into the Shulchan Aruch, I want to read Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah Rosh Chodesh Adar. Says the Chavetz Chaim. Va'er b'kitzer. First, I will give a short explanation Inyan Arba Parshiyos to the topic of the Arba Parshiyos. For who? And they are Chazal Tiknu. The Chazal Wamasakein Likrais Arba Parshiyos B'Shana, to lane 4 Parshiyos each year, Rosh Chodesh Adar ad Rosh Chodesh Nisan, during a time period that will span either 5 weeks or 6 weeks, from around Rosh Chodesh Adar to before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, lezichrain arba dvarim, to commemorate 4 different mitzvahs vehem elu, and these are they. Harishaynihi, the first one of the Dal Parsha is his Parsha Shkalim, the Parsha of Shkalim, the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, where we speak about the Klal Yisrael giving the Maksas HaShekel. Lezichrain, that is to commemorate Mitzvah's Maksas HaShekel, the mitzvah of the Maksas HaShekel Sheyispar B'Samach, which will be explained shortly. Shahayu Mechuyavam Litein LaLishka LeKarban HaTamid B'Chal Shana, the Karban Tamid that was brought twice every day, and the other Karbanos Tzibur, like the Musafin of Shabbos and the Yom Tovim, that were brought all year round. Those are Karbanos Tzibur. Every member of Klal Yisrael has to have a chelik in those karbanos. How do they have a chelik in those karbanos? Because every year, every yid gives a matzis hashekel into a lishka, into a box by the Beis Hamikdash. The money to buy the behemoths for the karbanos tzibur comes from that lishka. So everybody contributes to that lishka, and they all have a schus in the karbanos tzibur. So we lane Parsha Shkalim to commemorate the collection of the Shkalim that give every year a chelik in the karbanos tzibur. Hashniya, the second one of the Dal Parshas, Parsha Zachar, that's Parsha Zachar, where we remember the mitzvah to remember Maaseh Amalek, the evil that Amalek did to us when we came out of Mitzrayim. They came to attack us. Lizkar Maaseh Amalek. The Karen Oisa b'Shabbos shelifnei Purim. We lay Parsha Zachar, the Shabbos before Purim, l'samcha, in order to bring it close, l'maaseh Haman, to the story of Haman, shahaya mizera Amalek. Haman was an Amaleki. So before we go to Purim, which was the Maaseh Haman by Amalek, and where we waged war against Amalek, in the Megillah it says, "Vayamim ha'elu nizkarim v'na'asim." They are remembered and acted upon. So the Zichrain has to become before the Maisa. So before we come to Purim, we lane the Parsha of Zechiras Maaseh Amalek. Ukidei lahachtim Zechiras B'chias Amalek la'asiyasa kediksiv hayama ma'ela nizkarim v'nasim. So we lane Parsha Zachar before Purim. Hashlishis, the third of the Dalet Parshas, Parshas Para Aduma, is the beginning of Parshas Chukas, the Parsha of the Para Aduma. V'hi b'Shabbos shekoyde Parshas HaChodesh. We do that before Parshas HaChodesh. Shekein oyos reifasa b'midbar samach l'Nisan, because the Para Aduma in the Midbar was burnt right before Nisan, kedei lahazis ba'es Yisrael be'efra achatas miyad achar hakamas hamishkan. Because right when the Mishkan was put up, they wanted to be able to make the hazah on Klal Yisrael to sprinkle from the Mei Para Aduma, from the Efer Para, to sprinkle onto Klal Yisrael, to be mitar them, kedei sheyu tahirim, so that they should be tar v'yuklu lasis haPesach bizmanoi, so they should be able to bring the Karban Pesach on Yudal Nisan. Lakach Karen Parsha Zu, so we lay in the Parsha of the Para Aduma, lehispale lefanav yisparach, as a tefillah to the Rabbeinu Shalom, shagam aleinu yizrak mayim tahirim b'mehera. It's not only a remembrance to the mitzvah of Para Aduma, it's a tefillah to Barei Olam. We're asking the Rabbeinu Shalom to have Rachmanas on us, that we should be zeicha, to be sprinkled on from the Mei Para, so that we could become tahar, to go do the Avodah, to go bring Karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash. Haravias, the fourth one of the Dal Parshas, Parshas HaChodesh, is Parshas HaChodesh, B'Shabbos HaSabach l'Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when we get close to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Kedei l'Kadesh Chodesh Nisan. This is a remembrance to be Mekadesh Chodesh Nisan, the Ksiv B'Torah, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. Aval ein ze Ikar HaKiddush, this is not real Kiddush HaChodesh, Ki Ikar HaKiddush hu be'ez Riyas HaLavana. The real Kiddush HaChodesh is when the Molid comes, when we see the new Levana, the new moon, Shemekatcha Noisaya Bezdin. Bezdin makes Kiddush HaChodesh. Ve'ena Kriya Hazois Element Rabbanon. This Kriya is a Din Rabbanon Kedei Lezecher HaDvarim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. Now that we know what the Dalet Parshas are, says the Mechaber, Rosh Chodesh Adar Hasamach LeNisan. When we hit Rosh Chodesh Adar, which Rosh Chodesh Adar? The Adar that is Samach LeNisan, the Adar that is close to Nisan, meaning if it's a leap year, if it's an Iber like this year, we're talking about Adar Sheni. It's the Adar Hasamach LeNisan, excuse me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol na'eh b'dvarim. So Rosh Chodesh Adar Hasamach LeNisan, when we come to Rosh Chodesh of the Adar that is prior to Nisan, Shechal Lihiyos b'Shabbos. If that Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on a Shabbos, says the Mechaber, Karin Parsha Shkalim, we then lay in Parsha Shkalim on that Shabbos, Shehi Kisisa, which is from the beginning of Parsha Kisisa, Ad Va'asisa Kiar Nechoshes, until the pasuk of Va'asisa Kiar Nechoshes. So, Parshas Kisisa begins, Parak Lamed pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemar, Kisisa es Rosh Bnei Yisrael v'Kudeim, v'Nosenu ish kaifer nafshe Hashem b'Fkaidaisam. They all have to give Ze Yitnu Kol Ha'over Al Pekudim Machatzis HaShekel b'Shekel HaKodesh. It starts with pasuk Yud Aleph. For the Parsha of Shkalim, what do we lane? We lane from there until pasuk Yud Zayin, which is Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemar, v'Asisa Kiar Nechoshes v'Chadi Nechoshes l'Rafsa. So we lane over here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 psukim that discuss the Klal Yisrael giving the Machatzis HaShekel. That is Parshas Shkalim. So again, when are we doing this? The scenario that the Mechaber lays out is when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos. Now, Rosh Chodesh Adar does not always fall out on Shabbos. Sometimes Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out during the week. And we're going to see what we do then. Then we actually advance Parsha Shkalim, and we lay in Parsha Shkalim the last Shabbos of Chodesh Shvat, which is the month prior to Adar. But again, the Mechaber scenario right now is Rosh Chodesh Adar is on Shabbos. Rosh Chodesh Adar Samach LeNisan Shechal Liyos b'Shabbos. So it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh and it's Parsha Shkalim. Kairin Parsha Shkalim, we learn Parsha Shkalim, Shehi Kisisa, which is from the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, Ad Va'asisa Kiar Nechoshes, Umaftir, and for the Haftarah we learn from the Navi Malachim Beis, Vayichrois Yehoyada, a Parsha that discusses Melech Yehoyash and the Kohen Gadol Yehoyada, and it discusses them setting up a system to collect money for the Bedek Abayis of the Beis HaMikdash. Umaytzian Shloisha Svarim, on this Shabbos we would take out 3 Sifrei Torah. Be'echad Karei Parshas HaShavua. In the first Sefer Torah we lay in the Parsha HaShavua, the Parsha of that week. Uba'Sheni Yisha Rosh Chodesh. Since it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, the second Sefer Torah we lay in the Kriya for Rosh Chodesh. Uba'Shlishi, and in the third Sefer Torah, Karei Maftir B'Parsha Shkalim. We lay in the Maftir in Parshas Shkalim. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Bays, Kairin Parsha Shkalim, we lane Parsha Shkalim. The Amar Kra, because it says in the pasuk. Here, the Mishnah Berurah is going to lay out to you the background. Where does this come from? That we collect Machatzis HaShekel from every member of Klal Yisrael to have a chelik in the Karbonos Tzibur. What is that based on? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, Kairin Parsha Shkalim. The Amar Kra, because it says in the pasuk, Zois Oilas Chodesh. This is in the Kriya of Rosh Chodesh. The pasuk is discussing the Karban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh. And the pasuk says, Zois Oilas Chodesh. This is the Karban Oila for Rosh Chodesh. It's the Oilas Chodesh. B'chodshoi, on its month. Every month you have a Karban for that Rosh Chodesh. L'chodshei Hashana, for all of the Rosh Chodashim of the year. A lot of words Chodesh in this pasuk. Zois Oilas Chodesh. B'chodshoi, l'chodshei. V'hai l'chodshei yiseruhu. At least this word l'chodshei hashana is extra. There's a lot of words chodesh here. Ella, rather, the Chazal darshan this pasuk and they say, Amra Torah. What the Torah Kedosh is trying to tell you is, Yesh lecha chodesh. There is a month she'at tzarich l'chadshoi, where you have to renew the funding for all of the Karbonos Tzibur. Bahavas oilos timidin umusafin mitruma chadasha. There is a month during the year when you need to begin to collect, to take money for the Karbonos Tzibur, for the Tmidim and the Musafin, from a new collection, from a Truma Chadasha. So that's the word Chodesh, the extra word Chodesh. Chodesh is a month. Chadash, which is very similar, is new, or to renew. So the extra word of Chodesh or Lechodshe in this pasuk tells you that there is a month during the year when there's a renewal. What's that renewal? Till now, we took the money for the Karbanos Tzibur from the old collection, from the old Lishka. Now we have to take the money from a new collection, from a new Lishka. V'zeu Nisan. Which month is it that we start to take from the new Lishka? It's Nisan. How do we know it's Nisan? The Gemrinon b'Gemara, because we learned to the Gemara, guess what? Chavtes Amid Beis, yesterday's daf, we learned to the Gemara, b'Gzeira Shaveh, shechodesh zeh hu chodesh Nisan. The truth is that this Gzeira Shaveh is not really on Megillah Chavtes Amid Beis. Rashi talks about it in Megillah Chavtes Amid Beis. The Gemara alludes to the Gzeira Shaveh on Chavtes Amid Beis, but the Gemara itself does not spell out the Gzeira Shaveh in Megillah Chavtes Amid Beis. The Gemara spells it out. Yerushalmi spells it out in Shkolim. The Gemara Bavli spells it out in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah. But in any case, the Gzeira Shaveh is, we learn out of Gzeira Shaveh shechodesh zeh hu chodesh Nisan. What's the Gzeira Shaveh? Because the pasuk that we just quoted says Zois oilas chodesh b'chodshei lechodshei hashana. We have another pasuk that says by Nisan, Rishon hu lochem lechodshei hashana. So Hashana is Gzeira Shaveh. That pasuk Rishon hu lochem lechodshei hashana is speaking about Nisan. Zois oilas chodesh b'chodshei lechodshei hashana is also speaking about Nisan. So when we come to Nisan, we have to start taking money to purchase the Karbanos Tzibur from the new Lishka. The Keva de Nisan Boil Akruve Mitruma Chadasha. Now, since we've established that beginning Nisan, we have to take the money from the new Lishka, Lakach, therefore, Mikadminon umashmi'inon al hashkalim, we're makdim, we come before that, umashmi'in al hashkalim, and we announce the need for new shkalim, ba'adar hasamach loi, in the Adar that is close to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, sheyaviu shekleim b'Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so that Klal Yisrael should be prepared to bring the new shkalim on Chodesh Nisan. So again, what are we saying? What we're saying is like this. Why is the first one of the Dalet Parshas Parsha Shkalim? Because there was a need during the time of the Beis HaMikdash, it should be rebuilt b'meher v'yameinu. We have to start purchasing the behemoths for the Karbanos Tzibur from the new Lishka. That means that every member of Klal Yisrael's got to get his machzah shekel into the Beis HaMikdash before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. When do we start the collection? Well, we know that in the Torah, in Halacha, there's a great significance placed on 30 days. Shloshim Yom Kod B'Chag, Darshan B'Hilchas HaChag. So 30 days before Rosh Chodesh Nisan is Rosh Chodesh Adar. So Rosh Chodesh Adar, that's when they would start to announce to Klal Yisrael, it's time to give your shkalim. So nowadays we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, but as a Zeicher L'Dvarim, what do? What we do is a Shabbos around Rosh Chodesh. Again, the Mechaber scenario is it is Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Adar. So before Rosh Chodesh Adar or on Rosh Chodesh Adar, we lane Parsha Shkalim as a Zeicher L'Dvarim, like the Chavetz Chaim says. Va'anu us mishalmin parim svaseinu. We replace parim. We replace behemoths of Karbanos svaseinu with the words of our lips. What that means is we know that our tefillos are connected to Karbanos. So too over here, the concept of collecting the shkalim, we're not actually collecting shkalim because unfortunately it's not negayat us. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash. But nishalma parim svaseinu. We're going to replace it with svaseinu, with the service of our lips, with the kriya of Parsha Shkalim, bekriyas Parsha Shel Kisisa, tiksiv ba inyan hashkalim, where the Torah Kedosha discusses shkalim. Now the Gemara itself in Megillah asks the kasha. It's true that the Parsha, the beginning of Kisisa, discusses machzah shekel, but if you look at those psukim, it's collecting machzah shekel to cast the Adonim for the Mishkan. It doesn't say anything over there about the Karbanos Tzibur, but like the Gemara answers, that we darshan in that parsha it says the word truma 3 times, so we darshan from there 3 different trumas. There's the machzah shekel for the Adonim, there's another machzah shekel for the Karbanos Tzibur, that's our machzah shekel, and then there was also a truma for the building of the Mishkan. So we do darshan from those psukim the machzah shekel for the Karbanos. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Yoitzer, those who say Yoitzeris, Yotzer yesh l'shachris. There is a yotzer. If you look in the siddur, there are yotzers for shachris on Shabbos Parsha Shkalim, v'gam l'musif, and there are also yotzers that are said during the Chazaras Hashatz of Musif beParsha Shkalim ubeParsha HaChodesh. Aval b'Zachar uPara loy tiktum a Musif for Shabbos Zachar and Shabbos Para. They were not masakin yotzers in the Chazaras Hashatz of Musif. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Im eira shaloi karu parsha bein yanoi shel yom. Let's say we came to one of the weeks of the Dalet Parshias and they goofed. They didn't lane the Dalet Parshas. They forgot. The Gabbai didn't look in the Ezra's Torah Luach. So it was Parsha Shkalim. They didn't do it. Ein la tashlumin l'Shabbos haba. Don't think that you could go make it up next Shabbos. This is something that you can't make up. You lost it. You lost it. Now, however, the Chavetz Chaim is going to go through three different scenarios, three different possible mistakes that might have happened on a Shabbos of one of the Dalet Parshias, and how you can rectify the mistake if you catch it early enough. Let's say they took out the Sefer Torah, they forgot to lane Parsha Shkalim, so they went ahead and they laned the Parsha Shavua in the normal fashion. Or this happened on Parsha Zachar, Parsha Para, Parsha HaChodesh. They went ahead and they laned in the completely normal fashion 7 aliyahs in the Parsha, Maftir in the Parsha. They forgot to lane the Dalet Parshias. Im Kfar Amar Haftorah Shel Seder HaShavua. Let's say they went all the way through the Haftarah. They did 7 aliyahs in the Parsha Shavua. They did a maftir in the Parsha Shavua. The maftir went ahead and he made the brachas on the Haftarah, and they laned the Haftarah of the Parsha Shavua. And then they made the brachas la'achareha. They made the brachas after the Haftarah. And now it's starting for Musaf. And the Gabbai looks at the maftir and says, no, so you're going to daven Musaf? And then somebody says, wait a second, hold it. It's Parsha Shkalim. You know, whoever's going to daven Musaf is going to have to say Yotzris. Oh, we forgot to lane Shkalim. And now V'niskaru, and now you remembered. What do? Says the Mishnah. So if you blew it and you never remembered, and you remembered next week, there's no tashlumin. But now you remembered now. What do? Says the Chavetz Chaim. Tzrichim lachzor lahoitzi Sefer Torah. You go ahead, you take out another Sefer Torah. V'likreis haparsha bebracha lefaneha ula achareha. You call up an oila, and the oila makes a full regular aliyah, a bracha shebachabanu beforehand, ashenasal Torah semes afterwards. V'yomer achakach kaddish. Then you say chatzi kaddish. You got to say chatzi kaddish. Now this is interesting. On a normal Parsha Shkalim, when do you say Chatzi Kaddish? You lane 7 aliyahs in the Parsha Shavua, right? Then you take the second Sefer Torah, you put it on the bima, you say a Chatzi Kaddish, because you already did 7 aliyahs, you already yotzei the Kriyas HaTorah, you lane the whole Parsha Shavua with 7 aliyahs, so you go ahead and you say Chatzi Kaddish, you do Hag ben Galila, and then you lay in Parsha Shkalim and you do Hagba Galila. Now, what you're going to do is, you took out one Sefer Torah, you said a Chatzi Kaddish on that Sefer Torah. Now, you take out another Sefer Torah, you lay in the Parsha Shkalim, let's say, and then you got to make another Chatzi Kaddish. Why? Because in this case, the Sefer Torah wasn't on the bima. Not only wasn't the Parsha Shkalim Sefer Torah on the bima, it wasn't even taken out of the Aron. So certainly the Chatzi Kaddish that you said after the regular laning did not encompass this Kriya. So you need a Chatzi Kaddish on this Kriya. So you say a Chatzi Kaddish. So you got your Parsha Shavua. You took out another Sefer now and you repaired the damage. You laned Parsha Shkalim. Now what do you do with the Haftarah? Very interesting. V'yaftir, you lane the Haftarah of Parsha Shkalim, v'yikrais yahayada, but beloy bracha lefaneha ula achareha. But you don't make any brachas on the Haftarah. Why? Because you were already yotzei Haftarah by laning the Haftarah of the Parsha Shavua with the brachas lefaneha ula achareha. It's true that you didn't lane the proper Haftarah because you didn't lane the Haftarah of Parsha Shkalim, but the minig of Haftarah you already fulfilled. So now you can't go ahead and make brachas on the Haftarah of Parsha Shkalim. So you lane it, but you lane it without brachas. So that was scenario number 1. So again, what was scenario number 1? Well, I see I was much too ambitious. I thought we're doing 2 pages. No way. I hope we get through 1 page. Maybe I'll do another share later today to get the second page. But in any case, what was scenario number one? So far really we had two scenarios. One, they totally skipped one of the Daled Parshiyos. Nobody remembered. Now it's next week. Somebody says, whoa, we were supposed to do Parshat Shkolem next week. Is there a Tashlumin? No Tashlumin. Second scenario. Everybody forgot that it was, let's say, Parshat Shkolem. They took out one Sefer Torah. They laned a regular laning. 7 aliyahs in the Parshat Shavua, Maftir in the Parshat Shavua, the Haftarah of the Parshat Shavua, Hag B'Galila. They put the Sefer Torah away, and now somebody remembers it's Parshat Shkolem. What do? Take out a Sefer Torah, call up an Oila, make a regular aliyah, say Chati Kaddish, because you need a Kaddish on that Kriya, and then lane the Haftarah of Parshat Shkolem, but without brachas. Now we go to scenario number 3. Now they remembered a little bit earlier. When did they remember? They're going to lane the Haftarah of the Parshat Shavua. And the guy who has maftir, he goes, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. And then he looks and he says, whoa, they're giving me the regular Haftarah to lane. Isn't it Parshat Shkolem? I'm supposed to lane v'yichreis yahayada. No. He already made a bracha, and he made the bracha on the wrong Haftarah. What do? Yigmar a bracha. First, finish the bracha. V'yomer tzas psukim me'Haftaras hashavua. Lane several psukim from the regular Haftarah that you thought you were going to lane. Kedei shetia la bracha makam lochel. Because you can't not lane. You made a bracha. So the bracha has to be chal on something, otherwise it's going to be bracha levatala. So start lane a few psukim in the kriya that you thought you were going to lane. Ubeloi bracha achareh. Then cease and desist, and don't make the bracha shala achareha, the bracha after the Haftarah. Now we're going to take a break. V'yotziu Sefer Torah, take out a Sefer Torah. V'yikra oila echad min yayin shal yayim. Call up an oila to lane the one of the Daled Parshiyos that you omitted. Let's say it's Parshat Shkolem. Va'achar bracha achroina, and when he finishes his aliyah, Kaddish, then Yom Kaddish, say Chati Kaddish, then do Hag B'Galila, and then V'yikra Haftarah b'loi bracha lefaneha. Now lane, let's say Shkolem V'yichreis Yahayada, lane the proper Haftarah of the Daled Parshiyos, but without making a bracha lefaneha, because you already made a bracha before the Haftarah, when you were going to lay the wrong Haftarah. V'habracha shala achareh yivarech. But you will make the bracha shala achareh, because that you didn't make yet. Interesting. Now we go to scenario number 4. V'im nizkeru miyad achar sheberech bracha achroina al haTorah. Let's say you remember before you ever get to the Haftarah. So you laid the Parshat Shavua, you laid the maftir for the Parshat Shavua, and now you went to go lane the Haftarah. And the Baal Korah says, wait a second, this week's Haftarah is supposed to be of Yichreis Yahayada. Now the Oila, the one who's making the bracha on the Haftarah, he didn't start making the bracha yet. Ooh. So now pause. Yotziu Sefer Torah acheres, take out another Sefer Torah. V'yaniach eitzel harishona, put it down next to the first Sefer Torah. V'yomer Kaddish, say Chati Kaddish, so it should go on the second Sefer Torah. V'achar kach yikra acher sheyafter me'inyanim shel yoyim bebrich. Now call up an oila to lane one of the Daled Parshiyos on that Sefer, and then you'll lane the regular Haftarah, the Haftarah for the Daled Parshiyos. Okay, so some interesting scenarios. Okay, continues the Chavetz Chaim with yet another mistake. Im ta'u v'karu ha'parshiyos v'hamegillah ba'adar rishon. I have a great story about this, but it's not for now. Now that I made you curious, I'll owe it to you. I'll have to give it to you another time. Im ta'u v'karu ha'parshiyos v'hamegillah ba'adar rishon. It was an Ibriyar, like this year, and the Gabbai made a mistake. And he said, oh yeah, Adar Rishon, the first Adar. Adar Rishon is the Iker. So we're going to do Purim, we're going to lane Megillah, we're going to lane Daled Parshiyos, we're going to do everything in Adar Rishon. And then somebody came afterwards and said, no, actually, Adar Sheni is the Iker. You're supposed to do everything in Adar Sheni. Tzarech lachzor v'likreis ha-Megillah b'Sheni. You have to lane the Megillah over again in Adar Sheni. Or lane in a Parshiyos, when it comes to the Daled Parshiyos, the Beis Yosef mashma the ain't tzarech lachzor. The Beis Yosef is mashma that you don't have to repeat the Daled Parshiyos in Adar Sheni. Avo b'darkei Moshe Eliyahu Rabbah kasu the tzarech lachzor. But the Ramah and the Eliyahu Rabbah, they paskin that you do have to repeat the the Dalet Parshas again in Adar Sheni. Ois Katan Gimel. The Mechaber told us that on Parsha Shkolim Umaftir Vayichrais Yahayada, the Haftarah is from Melachim, from Sefer Melachim, Vayichrais Yahayada, Kisham Nizkar Nedavais Lebedek Abayis, because in that portion of Nach we speak about donations to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Bedek Abayis. Ve'ein maftirin b'shal Rosh Chodesh, but we don't lay the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh afshehi tedira, even though again you would say Tadar v'she'ena Tadar Kaidim, which is why. Right? We took out 3 Sifrei Torah. The first Sefer Torah was the Parshas HaShavua, 6 Aliyahs. Then Aliyah number 7 is Rosh Chodesh, because Tadar v'she'ena Tadar Kaidim. And then the Maftir is Shkolim, but the Haftarah is Shkolim, not Rosh Chodesh. Why? Tadar v'she'ena Tadar Kaidim. Misham de Mishkalim sliku b'Torah u'maftirin ba, because since the last thing that we laned was Shkolim, so the Haftarah is attached to the last thing that we lane, so we do a Haftarah of Shkolim. Ois Katan Dalid, the first Sefer Torah we used for the Parshas HaShavua, Shisha Anoshim. We call up 6 Aliyahs to the first Sefer Torah. We divide the Parshas HaShavua into 6 Aliyahs, so we go straight from Shishi to the end of the Parsha. But again, the Mishnah Berurah says, if you want to do more, you could do more. Ois Katan Heyu Basheni Shal Rosh Chodesh, the second Sefer Torah you use for the Rosh Chodesh Kriya, Umaschil Inu B'Yom HaShabbos. What the Mishnah Berurah is pointing out is the Rosh Chodesh Kriya during the week starts Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lemar Tzavis B'nei Yisrael V'Amart Aliyam Karbani Lachmi L'Yishai, the parsha of the Carbon Tamid. We don't lay that on Shabbos for Rosh Chodesh. We start from the next parsha, Uv'Yom HaShabbos. We start with the Karban Musaf of Shabbos and then go through the Karban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh U'B'Rosh Chodesh. U'Manichas Sefer Torah Shlishis Etzla. So again, we laned 6 Aliyahs from the first Sefer Torah. So we're not going to say Chatzi Kaddish after the first Sefer because we weren't Yotzei the mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah yet. For Shabbos we need 7 Kruim. So we take the second Sefer Torah, we bring it to the first Sefer Torah. I'm sorry, we put the second Sefer Torah on the Bima. We do a Hag B'Galila on the first Sefer Torah. Then we lane Rosh Chodesh from the second Sefer Torah. After we lane Rosh Chodesh from the second Sefer Torah, we take the third Sefer Torah, the Shkolim Sefer Torah, put it on the Bima next to the second Sefer Torah, V'Oimrim Chatzi Kaddish, and now we say Chatzi Kaddish. That Chatzi Kaddish goes back on the first 6 Aliyahs that we did from the first Sefer Torah. And the first Sefer Torah doesn't have to be on the Bima because it's obvious that Chatzi Kaddish goes back on that Kriya because we didn't have a Kaddish yet. So it's obvious that it goes back on the second Sefer Torah. It goes on Aliyah number 7, which was Rosh Chodesh that we just laned from Sefer Torah number 2. And it also covers the laning that for Shkolim that we're going to do from the third Sefer Torah because we're putting the third Sefer Torah on the Bima before we say Chatzi Kaddish. Today we're talking about a lot of mistakes. Again, we had 3 Sifrei Torah. The first one was supposed to be the Parshas HaShavua. The second one was supposed to be Rosh Chodesh. What happens if for the second Sefer Torah, instead of getting the Rosh Chodesh Sefer Torah, Parshas Pinchas, we got the third Sefer Torah, which is Parshas Nasai. And we already went ahead and we made, the Oila made the bracha, and we started laning Shkolim. I'm sorry, did I say, I might have misspoken. I might have said Chanukah. I didn't mean Chanukah. We're not talking about Chanukah. We're talking about Dalet Parshas. So again, the first Sefer Torah was supposed to be the Parshas HaShavua. The second one was supposed to be Rosh Chodesh. The third one was supposed to be Shkolim. But what we did by mistake was, we took Sefer Torah number 3 second instead of Sefer Torah number 2, and we called up the Oila, and the Oila already made the bracha on Parsha Shkolim, and the Balkara started laning Shkolim. What do we do now? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no problem. Yesayim b'Parsha Shkolim, no problem. Go ahead, read Parsha Shkolim. Why was Shkolim supposed to be last? Because Tadar v'She'ena Tadar Kaidim. So we're supposed to do Rosh Chodesh first. No, you did Shkolim first? No biggie. It's not a terrible tragedy. Now you'll do Aliyah number 8. So Sefer Torah number 3, that will be Parshas Shkolim. That will be your maftir. I'm sorry, that will be Rosh Chodesh. That will be your maftir Rosh Chodesh. The Haftarah Yomer Hashemayim Kisi. But now, instead of the Haftarah being Vayichrais Yahayada, right? Because Shkolim was supposed to be the last Kriya, so the Haftarah was going to be Vayichrais Yahayada. But now, due to your mistake, the last Kriya was the Rosh Chodesh Kriya in Sefer Torah number 3. So now the Haftarah becomes Hashemayim Kisi, which is the Haftarah for Rosh Chodesh. Me'achar shebekriyas HaTorah d'stayim me'inyan shel Shabbos for Rosh Chodesh. V'chein hu adin b'Shabbos Parshas HaChodesh k'shachar Rosh Chodesh Nisa b'Shabbos v'ikdul l'kos Parshas HaChodesh. The same halacha would apply by all of the Dalet Parshias. Okay, let's go to Siv Beis. I want to at least finish this page. Wow, I can't believe I thought we were going to do Kuf Nun as well. Boy. Okay, Siv Beis. B'Shabbos Shnia. So again, following the scenario that the Mechaber has been giving, which the Mechaber is following the layout of the Gemara in Megillah. This is kind of like the default layout that the Gemara uses, that Rosh Chodesh Adar was Shabbos. So Rosh Chodesh Adar was Shabbos, so then the first Shabbos of Parshas Shkolim, the first Shabbos of Chodesh Adar, you lein Parshas Shkolim. B'Shabbos Shnia, now the second Shabbos of Chodesh Adar, which is going to be Ches Adar. B'Shabbos Shnia, again, Maitziin Shnei Sfarim. Now we're going to take out 2 Sfarim. Last Shabbos we took out 3, because it was Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Shkolim. So last Shabbos we needed 3. This Shabbos we need 2. B'Shabbos Shnia, Maitziin Shnei Sfarim. Be'echad Kaira Parshas HaShavua. The first one, 6 aliyahs in the Parshas HaShavua. U'B'Sheni, and now in the second one, no, I'm sorry, why did I say 6 aliyahs? It could be 7 aliyahs. But in the first Sefer Torah, we learned Parshas HaShavua, right? 7 aliyahs. No reason to do 6 aliyahs. 7 aliyahs. Ubisheni, and in the second Sefer Torah, we're going to learn a maftir. Karei Zachar es Esharasa Lacha Amalek. We're going to learn Parshas Zechiras Ma'aseh Amalek is going to be in the maftir in Sefer Torah number 2. Because this is Shabbos Parshas Zachar. Because it's the Shabbos before Purim. Umaftir, and the Haftarah will be Pakadati Eis Asher Asa Amalek, which is the section of Sefer Shmuel that discusses Shaul HaMelech's Milchama with Amalek. Mishnah is cut Vav. Parshas HaShavua, the first Sefer Torah is the Parshas HaShavua. Umanichin Sefer Torah Hashniya Etzla. So after you learn 7 aliyahs of the Parshas HaShavua in the first Sefer, you bring the second Sefer, the Maftir Sefer, the Parshas Zachar Sefer, you put it on the bima next to the first Sefer, and you say Chatzi Kaddish, because you already had 7 aliyahs in the first Sefer Torah. So you say Chatzi Kaddish, and that Chatzi Kaddish covers the first Sefer and the second Sefer. Ois Katan Zayin, Amalek, you lay in the Parsha of Amalek, Ad Loi Tishkach. That whole little Parsha. Ois Katan Ches, Pakaditi, Keinu Barambam. The Rambam refers to this Haftarah as Pakaditi, which is the first pasuk which actually delineates Shmuel HaNavi's tzivui to Shaul HaMelech to go wage war. Uba Lavush Isa, the Lavush backs it up several psukim, and he says you start from Vayomer Shmuel, Koyamar Hashem, Pakaditi Eis Asher Asa. If you go back to Vayomer Shmuel, that's a couple of psukim earlier where it's very interesting. Shmuel HaNavi tells Shaul HaMelech, I was instructed by the Rebbeinu Shalom to anoint you as a Melech al Yisrael. And now HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Pakadati Eis Asher Asa Amalek. I remember what Amalek did, and therefore you should go wipe out Amalek. What does one have to do with the other? The thing is, because there are 3 mitzvahs that we're mechuyev to do when we come into Eretz Yisrael. One is to appoint a Melech. The second one is to wipe out Amalek. And the third one is to build a Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, what Shmuel HaNavi told Shaul HaMelech was, okay, now that we checked off checkbox number 1, the Rebbeinu Shalom was mitzaveh me to make you the Melech, so now we have a Melech. Now we have to go out on to checkbox number 2, which is we have to wage war with Amalek. So Hashem told me to make you Melech. You're Melech. Now Hashem says, Pakadati Eis Asher Asa Amalek. I remember the evil that Amalek did with us. Go wage war against Amalek. Okay, now we go to Siv Gimel. B'Shabbos Shlishis. Now we come to the third Shabbos of Adar. Now, again, according to the mathematical cheshbon here, according to the default scenario that the Mechaber is using, Rosh Chodesh was Shabbos. So, the first Shabbos was Parsha Shkolim. The second Shabbos was Ches Adar. Ches Adar is the Shabbos before Purim, Parsha Shkolim. Okay, the third Shabbos, if the second Shabbos is Ches, the third Shabbos is the 15th, is Tesvav. Oh, says the Mechaber, B'Shabbos Shlishis Shu Tesvav Ba'Adar, the third Shabbos is the 15th of Adar, Mafsikin. That Shabbos is known as the Shabbos Hafsaka. We don't do any of the Dalet Parshias on that Shabbos. Or B'Shabbos Revi'is, but now the fourth Shabbos of Adar, Shehi Chav Beis LaAdar, which Al Pi Cheshbon is now the 22nd of Adar. Once again, Meitziin Shnei Svarim, we take out two Sifrei Torah. Be'echad Karei B'Parshas HaShavua. The first Sefer Torah is 7 Aliyos in the Parshas HaShavua. Ubesheni Karei Parshas Para. The second Sefer Torah is going to be Parshas Para, the beginning of Chukas. Umaftir v'zarakti aleichem ayim tahirim, and the haftarah is going to be from Yecheskel v'zarakti aleichem mayim tahirim v'ayil le'el sibin kuf labed zayin sif hey. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Tess Hashavua. The first Sefer Torah is going to be the Parshas Hashavua, and again, since you laned 7 aliyos in the first Sefer Torah for the Parshas Hashavua, manichin Sefer Torah hashniya etzla. You take the second Torah, second Sefer, you put it on the bima next to the first Sefer, v'ayimrim Chatzi Kaddish, and you say Chatzi Kaddish, which will cover the kriya of both Svarim. Ois Cotton Yud, the second Sefer Torah is going to be Parshas Para, but Parshas Chukas, you start from the beginning of Parshas Chukas, Mitchilas HaSeder, Ad Titma Ado Erev, which is the whole Parsha that discusses the Para Aduma and how you use the Efer Para to be mazeh, to sprinkle from the May Para Aduma onto somebody who's Tamei Meis to be Metaher him. Ois Cotton Yud Aleph, the Ramah sent us V'ayil le'el b'simin Kuf Lamed Zayin Sif Hey, Sham Mavurim Tav L'Gamar Kala Parsha, where there's a discussion what to do if you didn't lane the full section of Parshas Chukas that you were supposed to lane. Sif Dalet, says the Mechaber, B'Shabbos Chamishi. Now we go to Shabbos number 5. So again, Shabbos number 1 was Rosh Chodesh Adar, Parshas Shkolim. Shabbos number 2 was the 8th of Adar before Purim, Parshas Zachar. Shabbos number 3 of Adar was the Shabbos of Hafsaka. Shabbos number 3 of Adar is Chaf Beis Adar. That was Parshas Para. Now we come to Shabbos number 5. Shabbos number 5 is the 29th of Adar. So in this scenario, there are 5 days of Shabbos in Adar. So Shabbos number 5 is the 29th of Adar. That is the day before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. B'Shabbos Chamishi, Shu Chav Tes Ba'Adar, Moitziin Shnei Svarim. We take out 2 Sifrei Torah. Be'echad Karei Parshas HaShavua. The first one is 7 aliyos in that week's Parsha. U'B'Sheni HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. And in the second one, we learn from Parshas Boi. HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chodashim. Rishonu Lochem L'Chodshei Hashana. The first mitzvah that Moshe Rabbeinu gave to Klal Yisrael, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, v'yikro elecha, they should take, not v'yikro elecha, they should go and they should take a sel aboyas, they should prepare for the Karban Pesach. Umafter in the Haftarah is Barishain Be'echad L'Chodesh in Sefer Yecheskel. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Cotton Yud Beis Hashavua, and again says the Mishnah Berurah El Manichet Sefer Torah Hashniya Etzla. Since we laid 7 aliyos in the Parshas Hashavua in the first Sefer, we put the second Sefer down next to it, Vayimrim Chatzi Kaddish, and we say a Chatzi Kaddish over both Svarim. Ois Cotton Yud Gimel HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Ad Toichlu Matzos, until the pasuk that ends Toichlu Matzos. Kishachar Rosh Chodesh Nisan b'Shabbos. If Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbos, Sha'ozhu Parshas HaChodesh, and you're going to lay Parshas HaChodesh on that Shabbos. So now you're going to have 3 Sifrei Torah. You're going to have Parshas HaShavua, Rosh Chodesh, and Parshas HaChodesh. Maftirin Parshas HaChodesh, so then the Haftarah will be the Haftarah for Parshas HaChodesh, V'lo Hashemayim Kissi, not Hashemayim Kissi. Why? because the third Sefer Torah is going to be the Kriya of Parshas HaChodesh, and that's what the Haftarah goes after. Umaytzian Shloisha Sfarim. The Echad Karin Parshas HaShavua. The first one is 6 Aliyas in the Parshas HaShavua. And since you only did 6 Aliyas, you can't say Kaddish. So Umanichin Ashniya, you put the Sefer Torah down on the beam next to the first one, the Ein Armin Kaddish without a Kaddish, because you don't have 7 Aliyas yet. Umagbiyan a Rishon of a Gailadin, you do Hagma and Galila. Upaitzchen Ashniya, then you open the second Sefer Torah of the Karban Parshas Rosh Chodesh, and you do the Rosh Chodesh Kriya, Minu B'yom HaShabbos Adveniskay. Umanichin Ashlishis, then you put the third Sefer Torah on the bima next to the second one. V'ayimrin Kaddish, and you say a Chatzi Kaddish, which will cover all 3 Sifrei Torah. Umagbiyan Ashniya of a Gailadin, and you do Hagma Galila on the third one. On the second one. And then you open the third Sefer Torah, the Karin Lamaftir by Parshas HaChodesh, and you lane the Haftarah from Parshas HaChodesh. Wow! I actually thought we were going to do Daf Kuf Nun, and we're already in 55 minutes. So I will try in Yirtz Hashem to do yet another share later today to complete Hilchas, to complete this Siman, and in that way we will be back on the Dirshu schedule. Thank you so much for joining me for Liban HaTorah. It's because of Liban HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua Sirfuas Parnasa and Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the B'Yisrael Tzedek. B'Meher of Yameinu. Amen. Be well.